states that matter most, of course, in 2020 are most likely going to be Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. But we have new polling out from the upper industrial states, upper Midwest industrial states. And it looks like the president's upside down in all of those states.
Well, and these were states, obviously, that were pivotal to his electoral college victory. And the new Emerson poll out of Iowa shows President Trump down in a state he won nearly 10 points by in 2016, trailing Joe Biden by 6 points and down 2 points to Bernie Sanders. While in Michigan, Trump is 8 points behind Biden and 6 points to Amy Klobuchar and trailing Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren. And a recent Emerson poll in Wisconsin shows Trump losing to Biden by 8 points while down 4 points against each Sanders and Warren, and even trailing Beto O'Rourke by 2 points. Claire McCaskill, it looks like Democrats have two tracks to run on, but the big one I would think would be health care.
Yeah, I think health care, but also I think we've got to talk about the loss, the failure to build manufacturing jobs in those states, the false promises. There's so many promises that have not been kept. And I think those two tracks, you know, we still have a trade problem that is significantly impacting not just manufacturing jobs in those states because of the increased cost of steel and aluminum, but also really impacting agriculture. So you've got a state like Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin. Agriculture is huge in those states. And the fact that farmers, especially with, you know, between climate change and flooding and the trade war, I think there is a real opportunity here if Democrats don't blow it by not sticking to those meat and potato issues that are so important in people's lives.
Let's talk. I want to go to Michael Steele and Nick Confessore here. Michael, I'll start with you, though. I mean, let's talk about those manufacturing jobs. Let's talk about trade. That was an issue Donald Trump talked about all the time. He said that Barack Obama and every president before him was a sucker because we had large trade deficits. Now we have the largest trade deficits in U.S. history. And you stack that on top of health care, on top of tax cuts for the largest multinational corporations and his billionaire buddies at Mar-a-Lago. And I just wonder, how tough is it going to be for Republicans, especially Donald Trump, to go back into Wisconsin, to go back into Michigan, to go back into Pennsylvania and claim that he's going to be fighting for the working man and woman?
Well, here's the truth. Donald Trump will go into those jurisdictions and make that claim. And he will make that claim boldly and loudly. But here's the rub. Will those voters believe him? At the end of the day, as reported just this morning on CNBC, those workers, those manufacturer workers, those who are out there on the consumer end of this, the taxpayers are paying for this trade war, paying at a tune of $1.4 billion that's lost to them, money that's out of their pocket in consumer goods, et cetera. So they are feeling the impact. The question is, will those voters discount that impact? Will they say, I love Donald Trump so much, I like what Donald Trump is doing, that I'm willing to suffer the pain of increased cost at the grocery store, increased cost for products that I like to buy, and increased loss of job opportunities. That's where this really comes down. And this is the opening, I think, to Claire's point, that Democrats will have as sort of a 1-2 punch. The health care punch, you're going to see increased cost and premiums. You're going to see the loss of health care options provided to you. And the economic punch of, hey, you've lost wages, you've lost jobs here, you've lost consumer good availabilities. Those questions are ones that the consumer, the voter, the taxpayer is going to have to ask and answer in those states. And that is going to be, for me, the tell of 2020.
Boy, it really is, Nick Confessore. How fascinating. You have a president who ran in 2016 as a candidate, a first-time candidate. We didn't have a record on him, but he ran as a populist. He's governing as a plutocrat. And the question is, will people in the Midwest who are going to determine who's the next president of the United States notice they got a plutocrat instead of a populist?
Well, Joe, every candidate for president or a campaign for president is a fight over who gets to be the outsider candidate. And the outsider candidate is the person who almost always wins. And Trump was the outsider guy in 2016. It was very effective. I think actually the Russia probe ending is a good thing for Democrats. And here's why. It breaks the fever. It clears the decks. The best outcome for the president was to run against Washington again, to be the object of a mysterious conspiracy, mysterious forces in Washington, the deep state, the threat of impeachment looming. That's done now. It's now going to be a race over his record and these issues. And it was health care that made Pelosi Speaker in 2018, and it could be health care that keeps her Speaker in 2020. This now sets the stage for Democrats to run on the president's record on trade, on manufacturing jobs, on soybean prices, and on health care, which ultimately is their best bet to beat him.
You know, Claire, it just seems to me that this is pretty simple, pretty basic. Donald, and you'll understand this, obviously, he's a prosecutor and somebody that spent a ton of time inside the courtroom. You can give the same evidence to a great prosecutor that you give to a bad prosecutor, and that can be the difference between a win or a loss. Here, the Democrats have all the evidence that they need to send Donald Trump to Mar-a-Lago for good. Only question is, are they going to have a great prosecutor of that case? Are they going to have another failed candidate that can't take it to Donald Trump? Because if it's another bad prosecutor of this political case against Donald Trump, he could be sitting at 42, 43%. And as we saw 2-3 years ago, he'll still win, won't he?
Yeah, and the skill that's going to be needed here is the candidate who can speak to the base of the Democratic Party in an inspirational way, but keeping their eyes firmly focused on those voters who will not make up their mind who they vote for president based on a political party. That's the key, because those voters, the ones who will decide, who frankly call themselves independent or sometimes Republican or sometimes Democrat, depending on how the wind is blowing, they will decide this presidential election in the 5 states that are going to be key to a victory for the Democratic Party. So you've got to do both of those. You've got to sell your case to the American people. And I do think whoever can do that skillfully without losing themselves to the left, it will be the candidate that will inspire and will get the nomination. And frankly, the big field may help us with that, because somebody's going to have to be really good to fight through that thicket.
Former Senator Claire McCaskill, thank you very much. Always great to have you on.
Thanks,
and
guys.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Capitol Hill, we're talking to a pair of American troops turned congressmen about their bipartisan effort to break through the noise in Washington. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.